You to feel all alone. I didn't get you around. I was moving around. Welcome to town, people.
Well, there you go, ladies and gentlemen. That is the great John Lee Hooker, Boogie Chillin' from his last album, Face to Face, a recording that I have introduced this show to numerous times before, and in fact was the opening song for the first 2 or 3 years of Watch This with Rick Ramos. Now, you know what? Sometimes you got to go back to the foundation of what started all of this and get a good idea, because it's all about reinvention. Now, how do you reinvent if you go back to something that you did before? I'm talking about reinvention as far as the podcast itself is concerned, and this whole idea of what the purpose is. I'm going on 5, maybe 6 years now. I think 5 years of knocking out podcast after podcast after podcast, and I think we're somewhere at around 201, 202. I'm not exactly sure what podcast we're at right now, and it doesn't really make a difference because I've never put a lot of faith or a lot of I've never put a lot of weight on numbers. We've done a lot of episodes. We did 30 some odd episodes when it was Lee and myself working out of the Burbank studios. Then I came back to do it out of my apartment on Beverly Boulevard in Los Angeles. Finding myself later on in this little house, the Fortress of Ultimate Darkness here in South Pasadena. And in those times, I've had a lot of guests. I've had, a buddy of mine, David Wilcombe, the great Mike Black. But somewhere along the line, I decided, I needed a co-host, and I brought in my good friend, just a great buddy of mine, one of the few guys that I can honestly say I find myself in a certain kind of brotherhood with Mr. Ibrahim Chavez, who I met in probably 2009, and we've been working pretty steadily on this thing for the last year or so. He's into it, I'm into it, and there's something very, I guess I would have to say something very overpowering about finding that partnership, that thing that really clicks. So it's very problematic for me right now because this time of year I'm working seasonal work. He's overwhelmed by his job as well as other aspects of his life, and we can't come together to do the episodes that we want to do so badly. So it looks like we will meet up again probably this weekend to do a couple of episodes, but I'm going to be filling the space with episodes on my own, going back to those early days, those mid-period days when it was just me here in the Fortress of Ultimate Darkness, sitting here with a bottle of whiskey, and then just talking about the things that matter. And sometimes we'll go off on little tangents. Sometimes we'll find our way around the story that is being told. But ultimately, when it comes down to it, this is, and always has been, always will be, a product of my psyche, my emotions, my beliefs, my attitudes, and that's what I'm ultimately laying down here. Whether it's me sitting here alone, me sitting here with Mike Black, me sitting here with other friends, or my partnership with Mr. Ibrahim Chavez, all I can do is control who I am and what I want this thing to be about from my end. The great thing about working with a partnership is a lot of like what Kurosawa said when he was writing a number of those great films, is that with a partner there's a certain balance, there's a certain level of understanding that is, I guess, a certain checks and balances that comes with the understanding of trying to put out a product that appeals on a number of different levels. So here we are. One of the ideas that I had, which is admittedly a little bit selfish on my part, but every once in a while you have to do something that is for you. And what I wanted to do was go through my collection of Blu-rays and DVDs, as well as things that I've wanted to watch that are on Hulu, Netflix, or Amazon Prime, and talk about things that are available to people. You see, one of the great aspects of the time that we live in is the availability of film to us. Now, if you guys are paying attention, the Criterion channel that was being distributed through Filmstruck, that got shot down, and it lasted a little over 2 years, maybe a little less than 2 years, I'm not sure. Unfortunately, during that time period in which it was available, I didn't have the money to subscribe to it, and subsequently I wasn't able to take advantage of that. But I'm looking forward to the rebranding and the fact that Criterion will be putting something out in 2019. That being said, I have a collection of probably close to 100 Criterion discs, but also a collection of probably, it's kind of weird to say, but probably a couple of thousand DVDs and Blu-rays, and I have them categorized by filmmakers, then genres, then the difference between television and film, but also broken down between HBO, Showtime, AMC, FX, and in some cases a number of different venues and networks. So the point of what I'm saying here is that over the next couple of weeks, whenever I can fit it in, we're going to be doing shorter episodes, 30 to 45 minute episodes that focus on one film that I have been wanting to watch for quite some time. A film within my collection that I haven't had a chance to watch, and that I'm looking forward to watching and then sitting down to talk about. Some of these films include The Laughing Policeman, starring Walter Matthau, Gene Hackman and Al Pacino in a film called Scarecrow that you can find on Warner Blu-ray Archives. Also, Freebie and the Bean with Alan Arkin and James Caan. That's a film that I have seen. The other two are films that I haven't seen. But also my collection of Criterion. We're going to be looking at films that maybe are culturally significant, some films that are just a good time, some films that I remember fondly from when I was growing up in the 80s, but also films that I think are important as a barometer of both the time and the culture in which they were made. I'm going to be looking at foreign films, documentaries, and in many cases, I'm going to be doing this by myself, and we're going to be repeating certain films when Ibrahim and I come back to sit down and hash through it, go through some of these films, and get a better understanding of what's out there. So I'm really excited at I'm really excited at the direction that the show is going to take, because what we do here, we are a constantly evolving species, and that is also and most importantly within our own selves, within our own understanding of who we are, what we believe, and what matters most to us. So with that being in mind, we're going to start knocking out short film, 30, 45 minutes, as I said before, reviews of films that I've wanted to watch for some time, that are in my collection, and that I just either have never made time for, or that I just, I've had a lot of excuses, and I don't believe in excuses. I believe in reasons for things happening or not happening, but I'm at a point now where really want to delve into this world, and I want to take advantage of what I have, so that at some point in this lifetime I will have seen everything that I have ever bought, including films that are coming out on DVD and Blu-ray now through different production houses like Kino Lorber, Criterion, Warner Blu-ray Archive, and that kind of thing. I mean, there's just a lot of really good stuff out there, and those of you who love films in the way that I do understand the importance of supporting hard, I guess the word is to say, tangible goods, I guess. Instead of simply streaming, it's nice to have something that you can hold in your hand. So, let's talk about a film that was in my collection that some of you have, some of you know, some of you haven't seen. Ernest Lubitsch's 1943 classic, To Be or Not to Be, a story of wartime Poland and a group of Jewish actors who are in danger of becoming victims of the Nazis' Third Reich. It's very interesting that this is a film that was made during the actual war. That's kind of I find that a little bit fascinating. That it's one of the few films that I can think of that discussed the Nazis and that terrible march towards fascism and Nazism that was sweeping that part of the world and that would pull the United States in. It's not necessarily a great film. I don't think it's a film that that resonates with me in the same way that other films of that era do. But it is an incredibly well made, funny, and strange little postcard of its time. That I find it fascinating that this is a film that existed in the 40s during the depths of World War II, and it was a film that was made. It addresses a great deal of the disgusting nature, the horribleness of Nazi Germany and Nazism as it spread across Eastern Europe during this period. But it doesn't, in a weird way, it doesn't really paint as dark a picture as is possible. And I think it's a factor of you can't hit an audience with that much suffering and dreariness. I mean, Jerry Lewis found out in the 70s that it's very difficult to make a film. It's very difficult to make a comedy about the Holocaust. And although a number of people praised Roberto Benigni's Life is Beautiful from the mid to early 1990s, there was also alternately a great number of people who found disfavor with it, who were disgusted by the idea of being able to joke about such a thing. I'm personally against the idea that there are any boundaries of what may be funny or where the possibility of humor is. And I think part of the problem that Benigni ran into was that he was not Jewish. So that everybody seems to believe that I'm the only one that can talk about my specific experience, my people, which I find that very limiting. So, getting back to 1943's To Be or Not to Be, it's a wonderful little film starring a very more drawn-in Jack Benny performance. This is not the film that I thought it was going to be. I expected the Jack Benny persona to come out more. I expected, and it's really kind of a testament to what Benny was capable of, because I grew up in the, early 80s, you know, the 80s were my decade, and during that time period, there was a lot of old television and Nickelodeon, Nickelodeon was premiering, and although it was a kids network during the day, kids go to sleep at a certain hour, and around 8 or 9 o'clock, it switched over to more adult-oriented fare, which, if I remember correctly, was a great deal of old television, including Burns and Allen, I Married Joan, shows like that. But one of the shows that they aired that I was incredibly fond of was the Jack Benny Show. And Jack Benny, see, for better or worse, I'm a student of comedy. I'm a student of, and I'm a student of cinema, but also comedy and the entertainment industry as a whole. And I find a lot of these shows fascinating in what they were able to accomplish. There were definitely standards. There were definitely restrictive standards during this time period that wouldn't allow certain images to be seen. And what's surprising to me is how often the work is cutting edge in a lot of ways. I think it's very important, and I've said this in the past, that as you watch a television show or a film, I find it incredibly important, almost imperative, that you watch it within the context of the times in which it was made. So you cannot judge a film by modern day standards. You have to judge it within the realm of the restrictions of what created it. So if you watch something like Peckinpah's The Wild Bunch in 68, 69, that period, you go into it with the understanding that the world was changing and the restrictions that once existed on cinema were no longer what they would become. Basically, the big bad wolf was coming in there and blowing down the house. So you start to understand that those films are masterpieces in their own right, because they were able to tell certain stories that a number of people might find difficult or in bad taste. I mean, during the time in which Lubitsch's film was released, 43, there were a great many people who took issue with some of the things that were said in the film. That some of the actions, for example, one scene where Jack Benny has a conversation with a dead body, or at least not a conversation with a dead body, but there's a playful kind of situation in which Jack Benny is almost discovered as being a Jewish actor and not the Third Reich spy that he is impersonating. There were some people who found, this kind of thing distasteful. If you've seen the movie, basically what it is Jack Benny and Carole Lombard, who is phenomenally beautiful in this film, and it's sad that she would die in a plane crash just months before the film was released. It was her last, I believe it was her last released film. The film, there are lines in it and attitudes about making fun of this world that people would find offensive. But I think Mel Brooks would take it even further in the 1983 remake, which was directed by a gentleman by the name of Alan Young, I believe. Not Brooks. One of the few films that Brooks starred in, was a major leading role, and did not direct himself. Which I would like to, watching the Lubitsch film, it's made me want to go back and go into that film and see what Mel Brooks did with his version, how he played with Anne Bancroft, and these great performances by Tim Matheson and primarily Jose Ferrer and the great Charles Durning, who was a character actor that oh God, I fell in love with Charles Durning. He was such a magnificent presence on screen, and he's so funny and so ridiculous that you can't help but just fall in love with him. So I will be returning to that film, and maybe I'll sit down, turn on the microphone, and talk a little bit about it, because, like I've said, I haven't seen it in probably 15, 20 years. I'm a big fan of Mel Brooks. I'm a big fan of Anne Bancroft. And every once in a while, it's good to go back to these experiences, to watch them again, to learn a little something more, to catch up on. But what we're talking about right now is the 43 film. And, I think it's a 42 film. My mistake, 1942. At the time, 1943, the critic Mildred Martin reviewed another of Lubitsch's films in the Philadelphia Inquirer, and she referred derogatively to his German birth and his comedy about Nazis in Poland, which is, of course, To Be or Not to Be. And Lubitsch responded. His response was published as an open letter to the newspaper, and he wrote, "What I have satirized in this picture are the Nazis and their ridiculous ideology. I have also satirized the attitude of actors who always remain actors regardless of how dangerous the situation might be, which I believe is a true observation. It can be argued if the tragedy of Poland realistically portrayed as in To Be or Not to Be can be merged with satire, I believe it can be, and so I believe it can be argued if the tragedy of Poland realistically portrayed as in To Be or Not to Be can be merged with satire. I believe it can be, and so do the audience, which I observed during a screening of To Be or Not to Be. But this is a matter of debate, and everyone is entitled to this point of view. But it is certainly a far cry from the Berlin-born director who finds fun in the bombing of Warsaw. At the end of the day, an artist has an obligation to tell the story that they want to tell, and they have an obligation to tell it in the manner in which it best serves the story. Now, in some cases, this might offend people. In some cases, people might become upset, to some degree justly, to other degrees unjustly. The fact of the matter is that sometimes you put something out there and you have no idea how it's going to affect people. There are those filmmakers who go out of their way to offend. I don't think what Lubitsch was doing was that. I don't believe in the idea of anything being so sacred that you cannot shine a light on it, that you are incapable or that you should be unwilling to point out the faults. I think that as human beings we have an obligation to express our opinions and our beliefs, but also to combat both violence and ignorance that surrounds us. I believe that film is the greatest art form that we have ever created. And I know that I'm not alone in believing that, but I also know that there are others who would combat that, debate it, and argue against me. They are also welcome to their opinion. It really doesn't matter on that case. What is important is the understanding that what needs to be put on that screen is a story that needs to happen because the writer, director, actors, and producers feel a need to tell a story. That's why we started every episode in the early days with John Lee Hooker, and that's why I return to it today, because it's in him and it's got to come out, and that is a very important factor of who we are as a people. You can't sit there and be lost in this idea that I don't have anything to say, or that I'm too afraid to say something that is meaningful because it might offend, or I might find myself in a situation where I never work again. You know, when Michael Powell made Peeping Tom back in the 60s, I don't know that he knew that he was going to offend people to that degree and that it would severely cripple his career. Maybe he did, maybe he didn't. I'm sure that he knew that the material he was dealing with, where this material that was based in the idea of voyeurism, violence and voyeurism, and implementing audience members into the danger that was created on screen. I don't know if Powell realized what he would be doing to his career, but it occurred. It happened, and maybe knowing it or realizing it later would have stopped him from creating the project that he ultimately made, or maybe it wouldn't have. Regardless of however things worked out, the film itself stands as a masterpiece. Peeping Tom is an incredible film. Todd Browning in the 30s made Freaks, which is a film that even today bothers people, which even today is considered abusive, I guess, in a sense, exploitative. But truth be told, it's not. At least I don't view it that way. I think it's one of the great films of the 30s, and the heroes are the freaks of the circus that are taken advantage of and rise up to take their vengeance on their oppressors. I think it's a brilliant film. I think it's a classic of the genre, and I think it's sad that we never got a chance to see more of what Todd Browning was capable of. That being said, let's go back to Lubitsch's film. Lubitsch's film is a fun little wartime comedy drama. There's tension there, there's excitement there, there's two great performances by Carole Lombard and Jack Benny as this couple, this acting couple who the husband is very self-consumed, the wife is flirting with the idea of cheating on her husband even though she loves him dearly. There's a young Robert Stack playing an heir and a pilot who falls in love with the Carole Lombard character. And there's a great little supporting cast of people who are actors who have to disguise themselves as Nazis in order to infiltrate the Third Reich and save themselves from certain death, either through execution or transportation towards the camps. I think the comedy works in that sense, in that these are people who are real life these are real human beings with faults and insecurities that are somehow able to transgress all that and save themselves. What I remember of the 83 remake with Mel Brooks and Anne Bancroft is that it goes even further than that, and I think it's also important in noting that Mel Brooks and Anne Bancroft were a married couple and loved each other dearly, and that comes out of that film. You know, the more I think about To Be or Not to Be, the more I want to see the remake. And I don't love this film, but I see why it's considered a great film. I understand how brave it was to put something like this on the screen, and I commend it. I commend this film for the chances that it took and just the desire to shine a light on something which at that time was very difficult to comment on. I mean, right now, when we look at it now, it's really easy to demonize the Nazis. It's really easy to shit on Hitler, and doing both of those things are deservedly. You do those things deservedly. Fuck them. They're horrible human beings. The very fact that we're living in a country right now where we have a president that doesn't denounce these groups or their behaviors or their attitudes or whatever, doesn't come out and straight out say, no, I do not associate with these people. That's troubling. It's troubling, but it's also it's also the type of situation where you don't understand what it once was. You don't understand that there were a great many American businessmen and politicians who supported Hitler, who supported the Third Reich and Nazism, people who supplied the Nazis with technology, weaponry, vehicles, because at the time it seemed to make sense to them. It's almost like George Carlin said. It was like, our job is to become bombing brown people. That's what we go. If you've got a country full of brown people, watch out. We'll goddamn bomb people. But when was the last white people that we bombed? The Germans. And that was because they were trying to cut in on our territory. That's our fucking job, The Nazis were trying to cut into what we were doing. So, you can make out of that whatever the fuck you want to make out of it. But it's very hard to not pay attention to those problems and recognize them for what they are. So, with that being said, I would nominate this. I would say, this film was nominated for one Academy Award, Best Music, scoring of a dramatic or comedy picture, and it's this is a good film. It's a good, interesting, wonderful little film with a beautiful performance by Carol Lombard, which would be her last, and it was a great opportunity to see a subtle, more relaxed Jack Benny that wasn't, he was definitely playing character. He wasn't playing the Jack Benny that we knew from the Jack Benny Show. He wasn't playing that character, that miser, that 39-year-old playboy, that kind of doofusy type of character, that nightclub comic that was living the good life in Los Angeles, I believe it was. I think that's where it was set. I recommend this film just in the sense of what we do as film watchers. One of the great things about film and its availability to us is this opportunity that these films provide in showing us a different time, showing us a different place, and showing us people, attitudes, beliefs, how people were dealing with certain things and how they would ultimately triumph or succumb to certain horrors, evils that existed in this world. Do I think this is a great film, and will I be watching it over and over again? No, probably not. I might watch it again sometime later in my life, where I might get this weird little Carol Lombard fix, or I was like, hey, let me see how Jack Benny was in that film again. Some of it is a little bit over the top and heavy. Some of it doesn't necessarily work for me. The jokes don't always work, but I think there's a lot of heart on that screen. I think there's a lot of moments where I am sold out to what's happening. And that's pretty much the most that you can hope for when you watch a movie. There is that hope, that belief that what you're watching has purpose, has meaning. That there was a love for making it, and subsequently you take something that is more than just, hey, that was a nice little hour and a half. So I'm going back into my collection, and I'm looking for these films. I'm looking for these moments. Because one of the great things about it is finding those things that last in your memory. I just picked up, we just had the Criterion Collection Barnes & Noble sale, and I went a little bit crazy. I bought the BBS story, which was America Lost and Found, the BBS story, which was Drive, He Said, The King of Marvin Gardens, which is a film I've never seen, which I probably, I'm going to watch that. I'm going to do a little episode on that. The Last Picture Show, Easy Rider, a film that I think is incredibly overrated. The Last Picture Show, like I said, which is a film that I love. The Monkeys in Head, Five Easy Pieces, another film that I've never seen. For as many, because it's weird, it's weird, as many films as I have seen, and that I'm known for seeing, for those people who do know me, they know I've seen a lot of movies. There's still thousands and thousands and thousands of movies that I haven't seen that I'm excited about getting a hold of, and some of them are going to be good, some of them are going to be bad. I'm going to be overwhelmed by some, I'm going to be underwhelmed by others. But it still gives me the opportunity to get these movies out there. I was talking with my buddies over there at the Heavyweight Chumps podcast, those two cats out of Mississippi, and it was great because they asked me to recommend a couple of Christmas films, and I was like, well, I'd recommend Richard Donner's Bill Murray starring Scrooged as a real Christmas movie, but also a movie that is set at Christmas, that's not necessarily a Christmas movie, is Steven Spielberg's 1941. And that's a movie that a lot of people have been dismissive of because it's an over-the-top, ridiculous hodgepodge of just like so much shit and ego that is on the screen. Ego in the sense that Spielberg was a young director who felt like he could do anything, and he does that. And after the success of Duel and then Jaws, which basically changed the game, and he might have done Close Encounters either right before or right after. We're talking about 1977. Yeah, I think he did Duel, Jaws, and then it was probably the Sugarland Express, Duel, Jaws, then 1941. Then Close Encounters, and then Raiders. I mean, people don't remember that at one point Spielberg was not the superstar that he would become. He was just an incredibly talented young filmmaker, and it was a decade of numerous great young filmmakers: De Palma, Friedkin, Coppola, George Lucas, Spielberg, and of course Martin Scorsese. So you have this changing of the old guard, replacement of people like Ernst Lubitsch. Even though I don't know, it'd be interesting to find more of Lubitsch's films and his what he did, because I'm not I know the name, but I'm not familiar with a lot of the stuff he did. Trouble in Paradise, then Notchka, The Shop Around the Corner. I mean, he has a huge filmography, and he's well respected and loved, but it wasn't something, he was never a director that really jumped out at me. But we're going to be talking about that stuff. He did Heaven Can Wait. I believe he did Heaven Can Wait. I'm not sure. He did a lot of films. Ultimately dying in 1947, so he was working through the silent era into talkies, and he laid a foundation. It's weird. I don't know his films. I didn't study him at Northwestern. He was a name that I knew because, like, when it comes to cinema, and the history of cinema, my brain is like a steel trap. It gets these names, and boom, bam, this is somebody that I might need to look into later on. Sometimes I do get that opportunity, sometimes I don't. But it's nice to know that it's there. So that's the point of these upcoming episodes. If you know that an episode is coming up and Ibrahim isn't going to be here, I'll put it out. It's going to be like, hey, Ramos is going solo again, and this is what I'm talking about. And boom. I'm going to recommend some stuff to you. And just be forewarned. Some of this stuff you're going to like. You're going to listen to what I say, and you're going to be like, yeah, he was on point. And the other times you're going to listen to it, and you're going to say, he was so fucking wrong, it's ridiculous. What was he thinking? Did I see the same fucking movie that he did? You know, stuff that I hate, you're going to love. Stuff that you love, I'm going to hate. I don't know. Some of it's going to work out that way. I don't know how it's, you know, a lot of people love Easy Rider. I hate that fucking movie. I don't understand what the point of it is. So, but, you know, hey, to each his own, and we all find it. We're all part of a cinematic family that is understanding more. We all relate to films differently than I relate to films differently than somebody else. Sometimes the paths cross, sometimes they don't. I love Keaton. I'm not so much a fan of Chaplin. Boom. What are you going to do? Doesn't mean I don't love Chaplin. I just prefer Keaton. Don't know much about Harold Lloyd. It's the same as the people who say, you know, craziest thing, Ibrahim is a big Beatles fan. I don't particularly care for the Beatles as much as I dig the Stones. Some of you guys out there are like, you know what, fuck both of them. It's all about Zeppelin, baby. I don't know. That's not the point, though. The point is, what do I think? If you want your opinion to go out there, if you want people to understand what you're saying and what you're thinking, you know what? Plop down the $30 a month to Libsyn and start your own goddamn podcast. I encourage you, you know, because it's liberating. It's a great feeling, okay? So, boom, that's it. So, that being said, take a look at Ernest Lubitsch's 2B or Not to Be. It's a great little film. You're going to have a lot of fun. It's not life-changing for me, but I enjoyed it. I had a great time. You know what? It was in me, and it had to come out. So thanks a lot for listening. We're going to be doing another couple episodes. I'm going to be doing Night Moves. I'm going to be doing Scarecrow. I'm going to be doing The Laughing Policeman. We're going to probably go through some of the Zatoichi films. Do some Takeshi Kitano, Kurosawa, Ozu, Mizoguchi. It's just, I'm really excited about making time to watch these films and then giving you guys my attitude regarding said film, because when it comes down to it, this is all about just talking, embracing these films that I love, that hopefully you do, or something that I don't particularly care for, and by all means, I'm trying to get back in touch. I'm trying to get back to people who have sent in emails and, you know, try to personalize something, you know. So don't get me wrong. I read the stuff that you send in. I'm just so goddamn busy with life and trying to make a living and trying to survive in the heart of the city to always get to it. But you know what? I read everything that you guys send me, and I appreciate you taking the time out. So if it takes me a while to get back to you, I apologize for that, but I eventually will get back to you. So thanks a lot. Rick Ramos, Gondo Ramos at yahoo.com, GONDORAMOS at Yahoo. If you got questions for Ibrahim specifically, send them to me and I'll forward them over to him. And that's where we are, and that's what we do. So thanks a lot for listening. Thanks a lot for the continued support. I'm going to leave you with one of the greats, Mr. John Lee Hooker, Boogie Chillin' from the album Face to Face. Thank you very much.
Yes, I know.
Alright, I'm going.
Well, I got to get on here with my
Hey, that was the one, man. Thank you.
All right. Look at him.
Hey, save me that. That leaves with me.
Yeah, George want that.
That's mine.
That's his one.
That's my cut.
We got no control over that.
That's right.
What the man said?